Coyle, Pauline Flynn, Erina Jennings, and Phelim Kavanagh are welcome our guests. Very welcome.
Okay, if you just give us a second to settle in, just as I drag out some photocopies and things.
Yes, and people will gradually be.
And gradually that people move in a little there too. That's all right. We're good there. And yeah, we're good on the background.
Nice smells.
Lunches.
What you got in that box?
Please pardon our rudeness.
That's
Yeah.
We don't have manners here in the USA.
So you made it in the dark.
Tongs there, yeah. Okay, so, well, I'm going to say a little.
Before we get started, a reminder, as I always do, and I'm going to remind myself to silence my cell phone.
Good thinking. Okay, well yeah, we're knocking off the phone, so I'm Derek Coyle on behalf of the Carlow Writers Cooperative, Carlow being a small town, probably in size, well it's about 25,000 people, so it'll be similar to some towns around the area, south of Dublin, an hour on the train maybe, and we're a local writers group, and most of us are from in around that general area. So anyway, look, you know, let's get stuck into things as such. We're going to read some poetry, all Irish, all contemporary. Most of the writers are still alive, and actually I might have one English man who lived in America a very long time, but has succeeded in listening very closely to Irish people coming out of Mass in San Francisco to write what I think is a very Irish poem, but from the US via an English poet. So we're going to do that. I have one poem that I think works very well. It's a Dublin based writer who's lived in Poughkeepsie, have I got it right? Poughkeepsie, and he teaches in Vassar College, Eamon Grenon, and he's lived and worked there a very long time. And I think the poem is very interesting because it straddles these two cultures in a very interesting way. So my one proposition is that we might read that poem quite carefully, or I'll offer a sort of guided reading to it, and you can ask questions and we'll bounce back and forth and have some discussion on that. That might happen after two poems have been read, and all you have to do is just listen to the poem. All the poems read and discussed today are here on handout afterwards, rather than me scuttling around, handing them all out. Which one is he reading from now? We'll listen to the poems, and if one really strikes you, or all of them, we have them on photocopy here. We'll certainly read one very carefully, and a really great poem, which I think we've a number of, we could discuss for weeks actually. Well, yeah, we could. So we might discuss one in detail, and we might discuss a second one, a very profound one by our late Nobel laureate James Bogland. And I wanted that because he makes a comparison between the prairies of America and the Irish landscape. And probably not technically prairie land here, but it looks kind of prairie land to us. It's pretty flat. I thought that opening might be interesting. But that's a great poem. I could certainly talk about that for 5 hours without stopping, and that's, you know, we'd all need more than lunch at that point. Yeah, we have a
1 hour.
Yeah, exactly. A pint of Guinness would be desired at that stage. So enough talk, poetry and discussion. So we're going to kick off with Pauline Flynn reading Michael Longley's poem, The Balloon.
The Balloon by Michael Longley. You are a child in the dream and not my mother. I float above your head as in a hot air balloon that casts no shadow on you looking up at me, and smiling and waving and running around without a limp across the shallow streams and fields of shiny grass, as though there were neither malformation nor pain. This is the first time ever I've seen you running. You are a child in the dream and not my mother, which may be why I call out from the balloon to you. Jump over the hedges, Connie, jump over the trees.
All right, another mother poem by a writer from the Midlands in Ireland, not necessarily distinguished for its literature. I say hoping there's nobody here from the Midlands who'd shoot me. Tongs by our friend Dermot Healy, and Erina Jennings is going to read this poem for us now. So we've Tongs by Dermot Healy.
Tongs by Dermot Healy. My mother sits by the grate a newspaper pressed like a sail sheet against the tall tongs. Behind the far whooshes, as the draught ascends, when the flame has taken, she lifts her feet onto the lower mantle, legs splayed neatly. Before the open heart, she drops asleep. Without her glasses on, mouth open, like a singer taking a breath, and her hands in her lap form a cup, into which passing strangers might have put some small token. She is sleeping between shifts. Her chair is tilted. One little toe in the brown nylon is bandaged. On the green fire tiles, her 2 shoes. In the nook, the long-legged tongs. On the window, the bars.
All right, thanks ladies. We'll come back to Phelim there slightly later on. So I'm going to pass out a poem now that I'll probably read, and we'll have it in front of us, and we'll have a little discussion around that and see how we get on. So I think we're good here with this one. Oh yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah. 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 All right, more here if you. Yeah.
Can we go the other side?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Good idea. Yeah. There we go. All right. Okay. So let's make sure we're good there. All right, Bonnie, you're good for one? Yeah. Okay. I took a lot of effort for an Irishman to pronounce that wonderful word, Poughkeepsie, but I hope I have it right. Native American, I think. Poughkeepsie. Ah, Poughkeepsie. There we go. Yeah, I hadn't checked that in a while, so there you go. That's how we read it. But anyway, so Dublin Poughkeepsie, Bread Knife in Exile by Eamon Grenon. Home from home again, the song of my mother's bread knife stops me mid-slice. Tiny teeth of Sheffield steel making their own music that had cut through the cackle and half-truths of our first kitchen as she'd sever the black crust of an elbow turnover or slice into the burnt brown of the Vienna roll. She'd slather with country butter, its salty sweat making our mouths water where we stood in the light of the there and then world that has become the here and now of the world as is. A few streaks of sunlight bringing in fall flicker and stipple shadow, leaves turning amber, ginger, rust as the season beyond the window turns, and I settle a migrant heart again in this otherwhere, hearing the persistent shrill stitching of one late September cricket, which my mother, though only a ghost, cocks her one good ear to, stopping the bread knife mid-slice to listen, stunned to silence first, then turning to ask me what the strange insect singing is. But before I can answer, she's smiling anyway, saying yes, in her old way to it, to what's becoming foreign as it is, familiar as the music her bone-handled bread knife goes on making, which, long ago now and far away, she stopped noticing. Okay. A poem I'm fond of, I have to say, because I can see that bread knife and think of my mother's bread knife. Okay, so I can just ask for a question if people are curious about anything and say, can you explain that bit to me, or that struck me. I can say a few things I like about it first too, but if anyone has a question or wants to say anything. This lady, an observation.
I'm not shy, so I'll break the ice talking.
Yeah.
I ordinarily do not prefer poetry as my literary
experience.
And he goes, ooh.
Yeah.
But And part of it for me personally is because it's just too far out there. I can't understand what they're trying to say. This is so smell it, hear it, so tangible that I really like that.
Okay, I get you. I like you. Okay.
And thank you.
Okay, cool. I'll respond to that straight off. If I was doing that as a writing thing, the reason I think this poem is grounded is because of the bread knife, right? It's a very solid object. It's familiar. It's everyday. We all have used one. I could see my mother's bread knife and saying, God, I wouldn't mind have that after she passes on. Inspired a bit by this poem, but appreciating it so on. I really like that. And he does a lot of very brilliant things through that bread knife, right? So a very brilliant thing I admire what she does here. He literally conjures the mother, the ghost of the mother, and actually we really feel the real presence of the mother, not only from the other world, but certainly even from Dublin to Poughkeepsie, but all of that we believe because of the bread knife, right? We get that. He has remembered his mother using that in Dublin all the time. She's passed on. He's left Dublin many years, but he's returned and come back. It's easier these days. But she's gone. But he has the bread knife. And he can use that as a kind of talisman to call his mother down into the room, which he does at the end of the poem. And this is why poetry is brilliant and everyone should read it and understand it because it's fantastic. Right? You know, this is advocacy for poetry. And that's it. And we believe that. Yeah, good, well, that's true.
Contemporary.
Yeah. And,
Well, it's more accessible.
well, we understand the world it comes from more. I would say as a literary teacher, older poetry comes from worlds we've lost touch with the parameters of, and it takes a bit more effort to get into them in a way. The advantage of very good contemporary work is we know the frame instinctively, or it's around us all the time, so it's easier to contextualize and just get. So the knife conjures down the mother. That's what I'd say. I could say a lot more about this poem, but I don't want to hog the session, as it were. So if people have questions or, again, further observations, this man here, yeah.
I love the beginning, the song of the knife. It arrested me, just like he stopped mid-slice.
Okay.
Thinking of his mother, I believe.
Yes.
And then the connection with the still stitching of the distant cricket.
Yes.
And how the parallel,
Really.
some sort of sawing there, the crickets do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, now that's help I need from people who know crickets in this part of the world, because because that has been sort of a mystery with me, and it's that bit where I go, I hope my students don't ask me too tight a question on this corner because I'm not sure fully how to get out of it. I have a few hunches, so I think you're dead right, my friend, in connecting the knife and that and the sound, because just to go for sound here, and poetry has to be about sound. What I would point out to students there on that second line is the tiny teeth of Sheffield steel making their own music. And it's the double E's in teeth and the double E's in steel. It's the buried double E in Sheffield. Do you see that there? We've the TH in teeth. We've the F sound in Sheffield. That's all working, whatever about the tiny teeth of Sheffield steel. We're hearing music there, sawing through the bread, right? That's skill, really, right? And it's so subtle that I would get it.
We all have those good memories, I think, of our mother making that sound and that crustiness.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, good. So we're in that world. So my question, and then so that's picked up by the persistent, shrill stitching of one late September cricket. Persistent stitching, late September. We hear that sound carried across there, so we're hearing that, and that's concentrated. So you're dead right, you instinctively, and I would say actually probably, I don't know how your poetic instincts are, but Grenon has actually seduced you through your ear and drawn you in here, and he's enticed you hourly to connect these two things, and you got that straight away. But I suspect he's led you there, but you're ahead of it. And that's an interesting thing, that our other senses can be ahead of us, if you like, and lead us into something. And I'm sure as a speech teacher, Bonnie could tell us loads about that. So let's go back to help me. The persistent shrill stitching of one late September cricket. What do you guys understand by that? Why stitching? Yeah?
Well, and I would say around my pond, we would call it chirping.
Right.
The crickets chirp, so it's just a different verb.
Okay, so you're taking the stitching to be
The sound that.
that they're making. So is that
Like
from?
a machine, like a sewing machine stitching. Is that
That's
what
what
the
I
sound
kind of
is?
wonder. Yeah,
Well,
you know
and
the way.
this is just a different verb than what
Yeah.
I would use.
Okay.
But it might.
I think it's the uniformity. If you picture a machine stitching, there's the uniformity of the stitching as the chirping is
Okay.
very much in a pocket.
Okay, which is like the sound of her
Yeah.
sawing the bread, isn't that it? So
Yes.
we got that.
Yes.
Okay, you've helped me immensely. I can now teach this poem a little more relaxed forevermore. I talked to the experts, I consulted them, and that's what they
You
told
can
me.
listen to the crickets now because they're going for it at the moment.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah.
Well, in the fine weather they were.
Yes, being unfamiliar with the sound, so far you've been able to hear the
Tree frog?
cicadas and the
Yes.
tree frog in the back of my house.
Yeah.
But we haven't really been treated to a cricket sound.
Oh, you mean the cicada and the cricket are a different thing?
They are
Oh.
different.
Okay.
Okay, okay.
Especially when that
That one
cricket
wrong.
gets in your basement or garage, you hear it.
Will you? Okay, well, I'm gonna chase down that sound, have a look. Okay, could anybody imitate it for me?
Pete.
Yeah.
cricket.
He's the cricket man. Yeah. You don't even like the game. All
Ron,
right.
can you do it? Because I know I
Find it on
can.
the phone.
I'll find you one.
Okay, well, just as a matter of curiosity, or we can do that ourselves too after.
Sure.
Again, a writing thing I would teach students, and again, we're all students. I like the way Eamon Grenon at this point in this poem too. He doesn't just say the brownish leaves over there. If I'm teaching writing students, I'd kind of say, lads, and actually, a great person or poet to teach us on this is the godfather of American poetry, I think Walt Whitman, who does that really, really well. Offer to the reader the world you've perceived in its detail, precision, and specificity, if I can use that word, right? So the instance of that here is Grenon not just saying the brownish leaves over there, he says amber, ginger, rust, right? And we're thinking if there's 40 shades of green, there's 50 shades of brown, right? Well, whatever about grey, okay? And he's given us that, and we're enjoying the sensuality of those words. We see them, but we also hear those different browns in a way. And you guys have a very rich fall, I'm sure, here. Well, he's up in, upper state New York, so he has all that going on there, and he's giving us a sense of that. So I really admire that as well. One other thing that I would say to students is, it's fascinating that as soon as the turning point of the poem is that marked by that little colon there midway through the poem. That's your 2 dots, which we never know how to use, but he certainly uses it brilliantly here as a marker. Are you with me there on the there and then world has become the here and now of the world as is? And we get that colon.
Yeah.
Well, if you read the poem very carefully, that's a poem where we were in Dublin just now, but now we've just gone to New York, right? And he signals that to the reader by a shift of language, which is a few streaks of sunlight bringing in fall, flicker, and stipple shadow. Don't know if you Americans appreciate that fall is your word. We talk about autumn, while you guys talk about fall. But I think most adults in Ireland know the Americans describe the autumn as fall, because they all bought Carol King's Tapestry, winter, spring, summer, and fall. That's
It's easier to rhyme too.
of course, it's very useful. Oh, you're dead right. Autumn's a hard word to rhyme. So by a subtle change of vocabulary, if you're attentive, Grenon has just told you we've left Ireland, we're now in the States. Okay, and that's a very subtle detail. He's not beating us over the head with it because he trusts us as readers to pick up on these things and go with it. I like that, as it were. So I think a nice poem. Another feature I like, just so I think it was very human. We like his mother. We don't know her too well, but he's presented us to us because she's like our mother. She has to turn slightly to us because she's only one good ear left, and we think that's so human. A frail lady, mature in her life, and she has to lean forward a little, or certainly turn her ear, as he tells us. She's smiling anyway, saying yes in her old way to it, because she's turned the ear to us. So it cocks her one good ear too, and so on, right? So we like that, and actually I like this image too, because we probably always, all mothers in the room can probably talk about the selective hearing thing. You know, sometimes it's just to pretend you don't hear either your husband, the dog, or the children, and so on. And the mother has developed the knack of when Eamon's kind of explaining things to her that she doesn't really want to follow or bother, she just goes, yes, yes, yeah, yes, when I'm with you, da, da, da. And that's reproduced there. She says yes, yes, as he's trying to explain Poughkeepsie and its difference to Dublin, and she's going, that's all too technical and convoluted for me, son. I just want to keep doing the bread. But I have to be polite to you, and you're my son after all. I can't pretend my child, when he's looking for attention, that I'm not listening, so I'm going, yes, 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 yes. But he knows now, certainly as a mature person, she's in some other world and she's drifted away, da 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 da. Does that kind of all make sense, all that? So I think that's all very human and very good. I think we're good on that one, I think, unless we have any other questions, observations.
Well, thank you for teaching me that in Ireland, apparently, there's not one cricket. Now, I'm used to them all over the place, hearing them, but when I first heard this and looked at this, I didn't realize that the cricket is strange, as the word is, strange sound of a cricket.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that's peace and quiet, no cricket, so you can count yourself as we're fortunate.
Yeah,
In
sure.
certain circumstances, anyway.
Yeah.
Basement,
Yeah.
all of it.
We have a lot of crows though.
And they
Jackdaws.
Okay, which we didn't sing earlier. It wouldn't be as that's true, but it wouldn't be as noisy as crickets, I don't think. But maybe I'm just very used to it, you see, and I don't know them the way you guys
They
don't.
sound different.
Do they?
I can't quite put my finger on it, but they sound different.
There is a difference. But here's the thing with language and so on. If you were just to say the word cricket, let's just say, for some reason you just went cricket. In Britain and Ireland, people are going to think about a game. Right? You know what cricket is, right? So that's just a funny thing with language sometimes.
When we got here and got out to Bonnie's, the first thing I said, oh, listen to the
Cicadas?
Yeah, the cicadas, yeah. Because to me that it's such a foreign sound, and I just recognise it in sort of hot places and different places, very far places from Ireland generally.
Yeah, which is nice to hear. Okay, I think we're going to have a little poetic interlude, which means Phelim is going to read a poem in a minute, but not, will you be ready to go? I'm going to hand that one out, but before I do that, I think we might hear another poem or two from the two ladies, and I'm going to open, well, you know what, I have a poem with an old person in it, and the next poem's a funeral, right? And I just think that's the best way to go with this. Might be the funeral first, the old person later. Would that kind of make sense? It just seems a bit better somehow. So Pauline Flynn is going to read a poem, Detour, by Michael Longley, which says, if you listen very carefully, I think, an awful lot about old-time Irish country towns and living. I will give one tip, it might help. While a poem seems to be about death, I actually believe, and would argue through a reading of a poem with students, it's about life. Through the vision of a funeral, he actually tells us a lot about this person's existence, and he's essentially saying, in a way, like Aristotle might say we should, that was a good life. Okay?
Okay. Detour by Michael Longley. I want my funeral to include this detour down the single street of a small market town. On either side of the procession, such names as Philbin, O'Malley, McNamara, Keane. A reverent pause to let a herd of milkers pass will bring me face to face with grubby parsnips, cauliflowers, and litter after a sun shower, then hay racks, broom handles, gas cylinders. Reflected in the slow sequence of shop windows, I shall be part of the action when his wife, draining the potatoes into a steamy sink, calls to the butcher to get ready for dinner, and the publican descends to change a barrel. From behind the one locked door for miles around, I shall prolong a detailed conversation with the man in the concrete telephone kiosk about where my funeral might be going next.
All right, we're good. Yeah, we'll let the guys settle in, that's all right. Okay, we're good. And the thing I'll say about the next one, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, I've said this once or twice today to the guys as we were talking, but this poem fascinates me. I think I did say that. This is the poem where it's written by Tom Gunn, sort of published his first collection in the 1950s. Smart graduate of Cambridge University, so he's English, but was enticed to San Francisco, and I just don't think it was the sun. I think the hippie thing appealed to him, and you know, rock and roll and Janis Joplin and all that vibe. And he moved across to California, and he lived in San Francisco for years. So we have an English poet moving to America, sort of always keeps a bit of his Englishness, but becomes kind of American, and he's somehow in between. But in the midst of all that, I think, the setup of this poem from a famous collection of his, here's two old Irish people talking after Mass on a Sunday somewhere in San Francisco. And I think we'd all agree at this table, this poem feels so Irish. Written by an Englishman living in America. That's the interesting thing. Okay, Erina Jennings is going to read Tom Gunn's poem, Well, Dennis O'Grady.
Well, Dennis O'Grady, by Thomas Gunn. Well, Dennis O'Grady, said the smiling old lady, pausing at the bus stop. I hear they're still praying for you. I read it in the bulletin. His wattled throat sagged above his careful tie and clean brown suit. I didn't hear his answer, but though bent a bit over his stick, he was delighted to be out. In the slight December sunshine, having a good walk, pleased it seems at all the prayers, and walking pretty straight on his own.
Right. It's a nice little image, I think. I'll have this in front of you as Phelim Kavanagh's going to read it, because it's a big poem, I think, in many ways. We'll point that out, but a big poem for a big country. Okay? Bogland by Heaney. We'll go with that. You good with that? We're going to discuss that one in a bit of detail, I think. All right. Okay, just a few things as such before we discuss it. Seamus Heaney, Ireland's last Nobel laureate, won the prize in 1995. Very popular in the US of A, by the way, where he's probably, well, for one time, I think probably was the biggest selling poet in the US. Certainly the biggest selling Irish poet, if not probably the biggest selling poet in the world. Very popular, even though he is very Irish and writes about very Irish things quite a lot. Anyway, I thought this is a poem we'd have to go with in a way, because he lived and worked in the States quite a long time. He was in Harvard since the early 70s, and this poem comes from '69. He'd been over and back before he gets the job and settles into Harvard, but he has seen the American prairie, and that's how he opens the poem, and it makes him think about the landscape back in Ireland. What we have is bogland, which is intriguing landscape in its way. And he dedicates a poem to T.P. Flanagan, who was a famous painter, famous actually for painting bogs and things in Ireland. And I think they had done a tour of Donegal just before Heaney wrote this poem, and had travelled through this type of landscape. And Flanagan possibly inspired to paint it, and Heaney inspired to write about it. And I've just recently come back from a trip to Donegal, and if you could ever manage a trip to Ireland, you have to go and see Donegal. But that's another story. I hope you will come and see us someday. Phelim Kavanagh is from Bunclody in Wexford. He's going to read the poem, and then we'll discuss this one in a little bit of detail if we wish. Okay.
Bogland. We have no prairies to slice a big sun at evening. Everywhere the eye concedes to encroaching horizon is wooed into the Cyclops eye of a tarn. Our unfenced country is bog that keeps crusting between the sights of the sun. They've taken the skeleton of the great Irish elk out of the peat, set it up, an astounding crateful of air. Butter sunk under more than 100 years was recovered salty and white. The ground itself is kind black butter. Melting and opening underfoot, missing its last definition by millions of years. They'll never dig coal here. Only the waterlogged trunks of great firs, soft as pulp. Our pioneers keep striking inwards and downwards. Every layer they strip seems camped on before. The bog holes might be Atlantic seepage, The wet centre is bottomless.
Right, thanks, Phil. Yeah. We'll let that one sit there a moment, or again, I'll ask for observations or questions. Again, I'll happily discuss a few details. If people, well, I'll do that for sure, but yeah, good man.
Please pardon my ignorance. The word tarn.
Oh yeah,
T-A-R-N.
yeah, excellent. There we go. You know what? That would be my first footnote. Probably even in Ireland, that would be required. Whatever about the US of A. So a tarn is what in standard English is known as a corrie. Not corrie, C-O-R-R-I-E. Again, if you're not students of physical geography, corrie in Ireland colloquially might mean a long-running British programme called Coronation Street. This is a bit of an in-joke to us, but a corrie actually is a glacial lake. It's been scooped out on the top of a mountain and it sits there. So, now, Heaney's argument for opting for tarn, in his corner of Ireland, in a very small patch of the English-speaking world, they don't use big fancy geographical terms like corrie, that's a tarn. Right, so local dialect is what you're getting there for Heaney. And early on he has confidence in what is a very big poem, and I think his first great poem in my view. He's willing to say, I'm from a small parish in Northern Ireland, there's probably just a couple of townlands in this area, and we call that thing a tarn. So I'm not pretending to be anyone else, I am where I'm from, and that's what we call it. And go and look it up, New Yorkers, and Kildare people, and Wicklow people, and Wexford people. So, yeah.
I might add, even the idea of bogland might need bear some explanation. Yeah.
Okay, because that's there at the heart of the poem. So bogland is probably not the only type of, it's probably not only found in Ireland. I have been asking a bit actually whether it's in the US, and our hosts, pardon, you do have some? There are some.
Bogs in Wisconsin.
Okay, in Wisconsin.
Very bogs.
Okay, do people have a good idea what a bog is? Hands up who doesn't know what a bog is.
It's wet.
Wetland land. In a nutshell, Ireland was deeply forested through prehistory, and over millennia, trees died into the landscape, got compressed and compressed and compressed, and it takes a very wet, humid landscape to produce this kind of effect. You have a very soggy, fertile enough, isn't it? Peaty, not for growing things on in bog form, but when you work it a bit, can be used to fertilise the landscape. When dried, it burns reasonably well. Not as good as coal, probably as good as or better than turf. This could be, the Irish could start fighting. Wood. As good as wood.
It would be on par with good quality wood.
Good quality wood. And so the Irish used to, we could talk about bog harvesting, or what we would call turf cutting and turf harvesting, drying the turf. You can still see it in parts of Ireland, in the west especially, and then you would burn it and so on, right? We actually fueled power stations on turf burning, believe it or not. Probably all closed now, but we did for a long time. And so there was an industrial scale cutting of the turf in Ireland. And so my grandfather owned a patch of bog, and I would have cut turf with him as a young lad. So there's great extensive areas, mainly in the Midlands of Ireland, where we have great turf areas. So I'm from, my mum's people are from what would be known as the Bog of Allen. Okay, and that was turf landscape. And up in Donegal there's quite a bit of it too, and Heaney's neck of the woods I think in Derry as well. So that's a bog. The other interesting one, and this is cultural information time, the colloquial word bog means a water closet in Ireland. So when somebody asks you where the bog is, you might want to be sure which bog we're talking about.
It's generally only men go to the bog.
Okay, women are far more civilised than that. And anyway, okay, we won't get into that debate. One other, or a couple of things. So that's the Cyclops eye of a tarn. I get students to think about that image, because actually I think it's very striking once you can see what Heaney's saying. So I want you to imagine now a mountain. Helps if it's an Irish mountain, but we won't fight over mountains and stuff. So you imagine a mountain, and there's a glacial lake on it, and you're a good distance away. Now what we remember about Homer's Cyclops, the one-eyed monster, and that's what Heaney is saying. The Cyclops eye of a tarn. As he's down on the bogland, or he's drawn, our horizon is blocked by mountains in ways. Bogs often are in central Ireland, and we have a perimeter of mountains around the country. So we're fenced in by mountain as you're on the bogland, and you give in to the horizon of the mountains. But you're drawn to something as your eye looks up. It's the Cyclops eye of a tarn. So that catches you. You feel this monster's eye looking down on you. You just imagine that. You see the lake flashing in sunlight on the side of the mountain. It looks like the Cyclops, a giant with its massive one big eye. It's a wonderful image, I think, and that's what he sets up there if we follow it. So we don't have this massive American prairie, but the Irish are very crafty. We're saying we have to be as good as the Americans some way or another with their big country and their big skies, so let's start to roll the dice. All right, buddy, are you ready? And he says, no, lads, you go out, we go in. And the poem takes off from there. So we go inwards then. We can't go outwards, we go in and we go down. So that bog land becomes a metaphor for Ireland and history and all that's happened there. It becomes this massive metaphor then actually for the Irish people and the Irish landscape and its history. Does that kind of make sense? So we can go down and down and down into our turf and just keep going down. So our extensiveness isn't outward across the land, but as he says in the poem, inwards and downwards into this landscape and history. Does that kind of make sense? That's the core metaphor. Is a metaphor. So a metaphor is a figure of thought. He's using the landscape to carry a big idea about identity in some way. Does that kind of make sense? And once we get him, we understand that, and so on. So let's say, so what goes on then there? What will you find in this bog? Well, you go way, way down, and the first thing you can find is the skeleton of the great Irish elk, which was an indigenous deer to the island of Ireland. Actually, we didn't kill it and ruin it. That's, at least thankfully, whatever else we've done. I did see a wonderful sticker on a car about preserve the bees, organic bees and stuff like that. Okay, you get my drift there. But we're not responsible for the death of the great Irish elk. I don't think we've really clearly established why, but they had disappeared from planet Earth and Ireland before we came along, actually. Right now, from the remains dug out of the bog, we know that they were a massive, massive animal, like much, much bigger than a horse, huge in stature. You can actually see reconstructed versions of them in our Natural History Museum. You go into Trinity College Dublin, actually, they have a wonderful one too, in the engineering building, which kind of makes sense in a strange way, natural engineering. Huge, big creature, and Heaney gets us to think about its antler span. Actually, I think I have read that before. Maybe now it's amazing what comes into your head. I actually think the antlers were responsible for the extinction of the elk. So here's the irony of history. The antlers were an evolutionary advantage. The bigger they got, the best chap got more women. So we're getting bigger and bigger antlers, and it got to the point that literally the chap couldn't lift them off the ground. And
It was to do with the forested country
Was
as
it,
well.
yeah?
They weren't able to travel through the forest with the huge antlers because they were so densely forested.
Yeah.
So it's not coincidental that they were found in the bog where these forests
Decayed down
decayed
into.
down into.
Okay, that's very interesting there. So that's the sad demise of the great Irish elk. But he said we can dig them out of the peat, and they remind us of prehistory and before we came along. So we got that coming there, and it's an astounding crate full of air. There's remarkable preservative quality in the bog, and of course he's going to emphasise that if he ties it into identity. What goes into it will come out of it. So the butter sunk under 100 years can come out salty and white. Now, apparently you can eat the honey that they dig out of the Egyptian pyramids, and you probably might try that. Do I recommend you try a bit of bog butter that's come out of an Irish bog? Well, health and safety would probably advise that you don't, or the food authority, whoever's responsible for that kind of thing in the US. But it's potentially edible if you want to take the risk. It's so well preserved. So we've that, and then he makes this very interesting comparison. Now, for me, in many ways, as a teacher of literature, and we look at lots of identity debates in a subject called Irish Studies, the poem gets interesting here. It's all interesting, but I do find this very interesting. I'll read the bit and then I'll say why. The ground itself is kind, black butter, melting and opening underfoot, missing its last definition by millions of years. They'll never dig coal here. Interesting tone. So, I'll say what I think about this, and we can go. We have what we call a trope in Irish discourse. I don't sound terribly academic here, but a recurring metaphor that Irish writers have gone back to, and it's been much debated, and you'll understand in a second why very soon. Ireland's always a woman, mythically, right? Kathleen na Houlihan, the old Hag of Bear, all
Queen
these,
Maeve.
Queen Maeve maybe, The feminists have had issues with this for very good reason. The women say it's typical of us, they fight over us, but we never get to say too much, and all that sort of stuff. But that trope recurs, and I think implicitly Heaney does it here. What's very interesting to me as a student of Heaney's career is he got a bit of criticism from that quarter, and we never see this return in Heaney again. I think Heaney took his lesson on that one and quietly dropped it and never came back to it. It's there in the early Heaney quite strongly in a number of poems, and then it goes and we never see it again, right? It's here. How do you say that? Well, the earth is kind, black butter. It's feminine and soft and pliable. It melts and opens underfoot. And this is the problem for the feminists. I know Bonnie Gable reasonably well in a very possible sense. No, Bonnie's a very kind-hearted woman. Would I describe her as soft and pliable? Probably not. She's glad I don't. You see the problem? Oh yeah, the woman bends always. She's not stable. She's not substantial. Men are hard and solid, and that's why they rule the world. Do you get the polarities? And that would be classic feminist critique of the women are soft, pliable, unreliable because thereof. We don't quite know what they are. There's some strange mix of something. They're very tempestuous and all that sort of thing ringing about. And implicitly, Heaney's in here with this. Okay, good man. And
You'll be coming to Ron's class on Friday.
Okay.
Intercultural communication.
Oh, great. So this gives you a setup for that. Brilliant.
More opportunity.
9 o'clock. No, 10 o'clock.
10:30.
Okay.
10:30 Friday.
Okay. We should talk to you again. Good man. Yeah. So Heaney describes the Irish landscape as feminine, soft, pliable. That's kind of in with a whole plethora of mythic discourse about Ireland. Misses this last definition by millions of years. He's celebrating this. I mean, he thinks this is a great thing, right? You know, this is really good. It's undefinable. Now, a lack of definition can be a problem, but if you look at it from another point of view, Heaney's saying it's endlessly creative. And this is the other implicitly feminine trope. It's productive. It's women giving birth. This earth can produce all sorts of manner of creative things because it's fecundity itself and fertility itself. Very, very pagan, you might say. It's Mother Earth type stuff. Okay, and he's celebrating that. One might say fine, but feminist discourse has had questions about this, right? But then he comes in with they'll never dig coal here. Now, what do people make of that? And that's all about tone. What country established itself in latter years on its coal fields? England. The Industrial Revolution, ruled Britannia, our industry that conquered the world started on coal. Do you get the idea? And remember, Heaney is essentially a Northern Irish Catholic. He's saying we'll never dig coal here, and we wouldn't want either. Right? Because that's your thing. Our thing is nicer, softer, kinder, gentler. You can have your masculine hardness and your toughness and your marine navy that conquered the world and your aggression. Have it. With your coal, we have turf, and it's just nicer. Right? That's kind of symbolically what he's expressing there, if you like, we could say. Does that kind of make sense? Again, another questionable polarity. You know, very strong in Northern Ireland, you know, but he's working off both of those, man, woman, England, Ireland, to establish identity. The English are this, we're this, there's a womanly quality about the land, and I like it. Against maybe the more masculine, aggressive, cold and imperial spirit of England, we're softer, feminine Celts, we don't mind being women in Ireland, and our men are a little bit womanly. That's all right, because we all know they're the creative people and they run the world.
Just ask a question, Derek, for clarification. How do you distinguish Northern Ireland from the north of Ireland? Do you?
Oh, we would. Yeah, I can
how would you
say something else. There's lots. This is a very complex territory, and it's very political, and there are very coded ways of talking about this complex question. Now, I could give you, probably a 1-year class for an hour a week on Northern Ireland and how to try to understand this problem, and we might be none of the wiser at the end of it, but I hope we would be. Okay, we do know, you might probably all familiar, look like we're old enough to have lived through what we call the Troubles. I don't know what it was referred to in the States as, the conflict in Northern Ireland, the conflict maybe, So we know Ireland is technically two countries on one island, right? We are all from, not that you have to side with us, but anyway, we're in what's called the Republic of Ireland, strong word, Republic of Ireland, and then which seceded from the British Empire through an armed struggle, I'm not going to deny that, in the early 20s of the last century. And after many years of colonial struggle, history, whatever, imperialism, actually, the argument might go, after colonising her own people, possibly the periphery, Scotland and Wales, England colonised Ireland as its first colonial conquest. And then those islands, and it included plenty of Irish, something that nationalism would deny, the Irish were happy enough, quite a number of them, to be part of that project for quite a while, but Republicans and Southern people don't talk about that too much, until maybe more latterly. Northern Ireland then remained part of the United Kingdom, happy to remain under the Union. Now, I could get into all that and could take forever. So that's the north of Ireland. Now,
6 counties.
Now that's incredibly, this is the complexity, right? Right? So it is the state of Northern Ireland. Officially, it's Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom with Scotland, Wales and England. That's its official, legal, international designation. Now, the guys have just said the 6 counties. I heard that in Donegal. That's kind of saying, I don't officially recognise this Northern Ireland thing. It's the 6 counties. The 6 idiots who should have stayed in the party and left. It could mean, right? Really, it belongs to the 9 counties called Ulster.
They might come back.
And they might come back someday when they cop on. Exactly, when they realise your true home is here, you fools. You know what I mean? And we're ready then to call you no longer the 6 counties, because you really belong to the 9 counties of Ulster, which is a prehistoric, early Celtic, or whatever, it's not Celtic, it's a questionable term, an ancient, much older description of what you really are, before these guys came over and messed up with you and confused you, okay? So that's
And the rest of us.
And the rest of us. And the rest of the world, by the way. You know what I mean? So, because now there's other designations. So you have Northern Ireland, we have the 6 counties, the 9 counties, which are now, so you're thinking 6, there are 3 other counties. How do we account for them? They belong to the country, the Republic of Ireland, but in ancient maps of Ireland and understanding, the island of Ireland was subdivided, right? Now we technically have 32 counties, by the way, introduced to the island by the British. 32 counties were subdivided were part of an ancient, older designation of Ireland into 4 regions. Ulster in the north, where most of us, actually all of us are from, is Leinster, sort of in the southeast. In the west, we have Connacht, and I'm missing somewhere, haven't I got Ulster?
Munster,
Connacht.
Leinster,
Oh,
Munster.
Munster. Oh, yeah, here we go. Connacht's over on the west of Ireland, including Galway, the west coast of Ireland, if you're there. And we got Munster in the southeast, which is Cork, Kerry, and so on. You get the idea there, right? So when Eamon Paisley, I don't think I have to introduce that name here, which probably says something here. He says Ulster says no. He's technically not right. Ulster including 9 counties, 3 of which he doesn't have. He's referring to what some might call the 6 counties, but is at least officially Northern Ireland. It probably just sounds better to Irish ears to say Ulster says no than Northern Ireland says no. Do you get the idea? There are some of the shades of difficulty, but that's the nuances of being inside the culture. We implicitly probably understand a lot of that without really knowing that we do understand that. But if you belong to which tribe you belong to, you know how to talk about these things. And as you talk about them, you're saying what tribe you're in. Okay? That really is the complexity of Northern Ireland. It is a complex place. Just I was in the Heaney, yeah?
I was just going to say, given our time,
Yeah.
it might be lovely for the group to hear just a quick little biography of what you do, where you're all pretty much from, as you said, the same area, but Derek Coyle, Professor of Creative Writing at Carlow College, anything else you'd like to share about each of you?
Yeah, that's grand.
Just a personal share.
Yeah, sure. I'm from near enough to the Bog, as I said, Kildare, which is a county south of Dublin, part of Leinster. Good horse country. I teach in Carlow College many years after doing my PhD in Glasgow. Really enjoyed it there. Love reading poetry. I think you guys have a brilliant tradition with some really, really brilliant writers, historically and contemporary. Do love reading it. I've been to States a number of times, always enjoy it. First actually arrived in Texas, would you go, oh Jesus, it wasn't Texas, was it? Well, you know, but I was, and it was very interesting actually. Texas is Texas after all. And that does make it interesting. I had a very nice time there. But there are interesting, very quirky things about it too, which I'm sure you'll find very interesting and quirky too. And I've been in the Midwest before. I have friends in Iowa, I've been there a number of years. I have flown into Cedar Rapids. You know, I've bought books in Prairie Lights in Iowa City. Great shop, a great poetry shop.
Let's all thank Derek.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm from Wicklow, which is just south of Dublin, and I'm a painter by profession, and actually spent a semester at the Art Institute back in 1985, which I absolutely adored. I've lived many years in Japan as well. I've travelled a lot, especially in relation to painting. And in 2010 I took a master's in creative writing to write short stories, as I thought, and discovered poetry. So I was exactly like you. I thought, not interested in poetry, can't get it. But when I started writing, I finally got it, and now no poem phases me. You know, I can take them all on.
And what is your name?
Pauline
I was just
Flynn.
going to say, let's all thank Pauline Flynn.
My name is erina, and I've been, I suppose, writing poetry from childhood, but as a very, very different reasons. Probably as a diary and as a way of just negotiating life and life experiences and trying to put them somewhere. So I'd come out with all these poems to try and just manage life, you know. So I've written poetry all my life, but it's only in the last 10 years that I've been trying to perfect the way I write poetry, the way I present it, and it's just so that I can get that message out. I tend to write a poem, a draft, and then carve the poem out of it slowly, and just slowly, so that it can match what I'm trying to say, to express to an audience or whatever. So that's just a personal thing. Thank you.
My name is Phelim Kavanagh. I come from a very rural place in County Wexford in Ireland, a place called Slievewee. It's located, Slievewee is the highest hill in Leinster, and it's really, really rural, about 20 years behind everywhere else in Ireland. That makes it about 50 years behind here. So when I say it's great to be here, I really mean it's great to be here. I'm a farmer and a poet, and I'm a farmer because there's no money in poetry. And I enjoy reading poetry, writing poetry, and that whole world that is the poetic world.
And what do you farm?
I farm tillage and beef.
And tillage?
Tillage, explain.
Tillage would be grains, wheat, barley, oats, and it's specific to an area around Slievewee. We produce a particular grain crop, malting barley, for the Guinness. I don't know if you're familiar with the Guinness.
I've read about that.
So we're in a little pocket where we produce that malting barley specifically for Guinness Brewery to make that black thick stuff that's pretty nice. If you're not familiar with, if you get the chance, a pint or two of that, there's feeding in it as well as a drink.
And let's thank Phelim Kavanagh.